Please follow along in your notes as we go through these 2 example problems, and then you'll have 2 problems to do on your own. So the first question asks you to divide x cubed minus 5x squared minus 4x plus 2. So we're going to take the coefficients from that equation and put them inside the synthetic division box. All right, so there's going to be 4 coefficients. So we take the number before the x cubed, which is 1. The next one is negative 5. And then you have negative 4. And then you have positive 2. Now we need to divide that by x plus 1. So whenever you're dividing, you do the opposite of what you're dividing by. So outside, we're going to have a negative 1. Now we use synthetic division because it's a shortcut for long division. So you still follow the same steps. Your first step is to bring down. So we're going to bring down this 1. And then we repeat the steps, multiply, add, multiply, add. So I'm going to take this negative 1 and multiply it by 1. And I put it underneath the next number. So negative 1 times 1 equals negative 1. Then we add them together. Negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6. So that third step was add. And you repeat the multiply and add steps until you're out of numbers. So I'm going to then multiply negative 1 times negative 6, and we get positive 6. Then I add negative 4 plus 6 is positive 2. And we're back to multiply. Multiply negative 1 times positive 2, and that gives you negative 2. Then you add 2 plus negative 2 gives us 0. So I take these numbers that are at the bottom, the 1, negative 6, 2, and 0, and I'm going to write those all out. So we have 1, negative 6, 2, and 0. Now, we started with an x cubed, so I need to do 1 less than an x cubed, so that would be 1x squared. And then you have x to the first power, x to the 0 power. And the last term is the remainder, so we do not have a remainder in this case. So my final answer, if I wanted to simplify it, would be x squared minus 6x plus 2. Because we did not have a remainder. Now, when you don't have a remainder, that means this x plus 1 is a factor of the polynomial that we divided. So we're going to say, yes, it is a factor because the remainder is 0. That means that the last number that you get is 0. Now the next question is to write the factorization. To write the factorization, you take this x plus 1 that you were dividing by, put that in parentheses, and then you're multiplying it by your answer, which was the x squared minus 6x plus 2. So that is the factorization of the polynomial. And that only works when the remainder is 0. Because a remainder of 0 tells us that x plus 1 is a factor. Moving on to the second problem, we're going to be doing that same process again. We're going to be dividing. So we have x cubed minus 7x minus x minus 56. So I take these coefficients. That's a 1, a negative 7, negative 1, and negative 56. And I put those going along the top on the inside of that big L. You can put them in boxes if you want to try to separate them. Now this time we are dividing by x minus 8. So I need to do the opposite of that and put that number on the outside. So the opposite of minus 8 is a positive 8. That number goes on the outside. Now we're going to do our synthetic division. We bring down the first number, so that's 1. Then you do your multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, add. So 8 times 1 is 8, and you put that underneath the next number. Then we're going to add negative 7 plus 8 is positive 1. Then we multiply again. The number on the outside, 8, times 1 gives us 8. And then we add negative 1 plus 8 gives us 7. Multiply again. The number on the outside, 8, times 7 gives us 56. And then you add negative 56 plus positive 56 gives you 0. So just like last week, we take these numbers that are at the bottom. So we have 1, 1, 7, 0. The polynomial that we were dividing is x cubed, has a degree of 3. So we need to do 1 less than that. So that would be x squared. And then you keep counting down. After 2, we have a 1, and after 1, we have a 0. And then we have our remainder, and again, we see that the remainder is 0. So normally we put this over x minus 8, but since it's 0, that means that there's nothing there and we don't need to include it. So our simplified answer is x squared plus x plus 7. So that's what we get when we divide. The next question asks, is x minus 8 a factor of the polynomial? So when it asks you if it's a factor, you check the remainder. If the remainder is 0, it is a factor. If it's not 0, it's not a factor. So yes, it is a factor because the remainder is 0. Now the last part you have to do is write the factorization. And just like before, we take what we divided by. So we take that x minus 8 and we multiply it by our answer, which was the x squared plus x plus 7. Now you're going to do the same exact thing on the next page. You have 2 questions to try on your own, and then make sure you submit your answers.